All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome back again to the FY27 Spending Affordability Advisory Committee. This is our sixth meeting. We're going to cover two topics today. We'll start by Dr. Clinch. We'll have a presentation on local economy and personal income forecast. This is always very critical because it's directly impact our county's income tax, but also overall economic base that's related to the revenue picture, both short-term and long-term. So we are looking forward to that. And following that, I will make an update on the county's overall budget outlook with a focus on revenue projection and also offer preliminary multi-year projections here. One thing I want to mention that is that this week is a little unique because we have two meetings. Today is a meeting on the economy and on the revenue multi-year. And Friday, we have another meeting in person or prefer to be in person that will have the group discuss about recommendations here. And that's going to be chaired by our vice chair of the committee, Todd, and he's here today. And Todd, later, I'll invite you to talk for a few minutes if you have any thoughts for that. And then the recommendation on this Friday discussion hopefully generate some key points here to be included in the report. And the following week, next week, we already have a backup placeholder, but the overall plan is hoping that this Friday we can wrap up recommendation. So next week we'll cancel the meeting, and then just a small team of volunteers that will be volunteered folks there will help working on drafting a rough report, and that will be brought back and share with the committee the following week there for review and a vote at the end of this month. So before I hand it over to Dr. Clinch, Todd, do you want to talk a little bit in terms of what people need to look forward to for report recommendations and writing?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I just want to go back in time to our beginning where we looked at kind of the four categories and kind of loosely assigned people to be thinking through what they think their focus should be, or if there are any key messages in this year's report. One thing that does strike me is that this is a pretty smooth, kind of less unpredictable uh, series of meetings that we've had this year and looking forward than we've seen certainly last year and in previous years as well. So it might be a little less striking and dramatic a report, I think, this year, but I still think there's a lot of information in the data that's been provided that we can take advantage of and try to focus on looking forward. But I would ask you to go back and think through in your categories what you think your key takeaways might be that we can discuss on Friday, and then we can talk about, if necessary, carrying that over to Tuesday of next week before we get into our report writing. So if you'd all think about that, that would be great, and that'll give us some grist for the mill, if you will, on Friday of this week. So that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. And I'll add to that that if you actually have some thoughts there, if you want to share in advance, you can kind of drop a note to Todd and myself on that there. But also feel free to just bring directly to this Friday's discussion anything you feel like are important and want to suggest to include in the report there.
The other thing along those lines, Holly, in terms of kind of previewing what you might want to talk about on Friday, is to, if you have the opportunity, take a look at the slides again in the categories that you might be contributing information or points to, and see if there's anything you need to follow up on. If you need anything from speakers, that would be helpful to have before Friday and to give them a heads up, to provide some augmenting information that might help us on Friday. So if there is anything that you want to pursue a little further, these next 3 or 4 days would be the time to do it.
Right. So towards the end of the meeting, I will pull I'll let Dr. Clinch start, and towards the end of the meeting, I will actually pull that slide, I think I know, Todd, what you reference to
Yeah, yeah.
about like the kind of assigned focus by people. I'll do that at the end of the meeting, so just refresh people's memory there. Thank you. Dr. Clinch, do you want to start?
I will start. Share on beginning. Uh-oh. There we go. Am I showing this present? Is it up?
Yeah, it's good. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, I've got kind of an easy job, I think, because I'm following, 6 weeks of presentations. I think Darius really kind of set us up with where the state and national economy are going. Jeff and Jimmy kind of talked about demographics and real estate conditions, and so we're pretty set up. My goal today is to kind of tie it all together and kind of talk about how some of these conditions impact the county's economy, and most importantly, since we're here to talk about it, the fiscal outlook. So today I'm going to do three things. One is I'll talk about the revenue outlook, and as in past years, I kind of talk about three main areas: population and workforce, county economy and county employment, so economic development, and then real estate conditions. I'll do my personal income forecast, where I think personal income will be going next year or two. And then as last year, Holly asked me to add some discussions of risk factors to these projections, so I'll go into those. So I think you can ask any questions as we go along, or wait till the end, however you want to do. So in terms of the county's fiscal health, kind of on the revenue end, there's two real revenue streams that drive things. It's property tax and income tax, which together account for 69% of all funds raised by the county and 85% of general funds revenues. And these sources are really impacted by three main areas. So population and workforce issues really drive property taxes and income growth. So the more people move in, real estate prices go up, real estate taxes go up. More people move in, higher incomes, income taxes go up. Now, economic growth is kind of the county's business community. So how is employment in the county doing? So the top kind of talks about employment of county residents. The second part kind of talks about jobs in the county, because about almost 60% of people work within the county, and this drives both property and income taxes. Commercial property tax is a huge or important part of the county's fiscal health, and then finally real estate conditions, which really drive the property taxes, which will be what's not moving. There we go. So first, I'm going to jump into property or population growth. So things that are in red are things that worry me. Things that are in green are good things that shouldn't worry us. Population growth, kind of in summary, Maryland has very slow population growth. We're in the bottom 20 states for population growth, and bottom about 15 states for employment growth. And the state is experiencing an out-migration of high income and highly educated residents. We have slower county growth in population. We have migration, which is kind of a mixed bag. When you look at the IRS data with the new data not out, so the data I have in the report this year is going to be the same as last year, you have increased county out migration and higher income people moving out than moving in. Census shows a slightly different survey based. The Census American Community Survey shows the county gaining higher income and better educated residents from out of state, with kind of a net loss to in-state, which again is a change from in the past. And as we've talked about, especially in Jeff's presentation, an aging county population. The workforce growth, the county labor force and number of employed has not yet fully recovered. It actually did come back up to pre-recession levels, but has since fallen back down. The counties, and that's a worrying sign, the county's labor force participation remains high and has fully recovered, and the county has the highest incomes in Maryland. Strange that doesn't move it. There we go. But again, what are these points? I'll go into the numbers behind each of these, and we'll be sending the report. Oh, was there a question, Todd?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Richard. If you go back one, maybe it just went too fast and I didn't get it. What's the difference between bullet 1 and bullet 2?
Population growth is just general population growth, and then workforce.
No, in the workforce.
In workforce growth, 1B, bullet 1 and bullet 2, do those conflict?
Oh, shit. Well, the slower county growth.
Workforce growth. What's the difference between county labor force?
Has it recovered or not recovered? Don't these say two different things?
Well, it recovered and then went back down with the most recent federal cuts. So
what's the difference between labor force and labor force participation?
Two different sources. Labor force is the number of people in the workforce. Yeah. Labor force participation is the share of people working in the labor force.
So one is the actual number and 2 is the
percentage. One is a number and one is a survey-based estimate of how many people are working.
Is that isn't that national too? Like the labor force is not as high, but the labor force participation is.
Correct. There's a subset. Okay. I actually have a slide on this. So if we can hold this one till then.
Okay, I get it. Yep.
So I was going to confuse bullet 1, bullet 2. I'll try to renumber them. Maybe easier if I do this next year. Howard County population growth. I'm going to go really fast here because we've talked about it with Jeff. But Howard County is still one of Maryland's fastest growing counties over the long term. But the growth has significantly slowed since 2020. The decade before 2020. We were the 5th fastest growing in terms of numbers. We grew by 16%, second highest after Frederick. So since 20, we've really kind of dropped down. We've gained less than 8,000 residents over the last 4 years. It's the 5th most, but again, we grew by 2.2%. That's the 13th highest. So, we have really transitioned, as we've talked about, from running out of real estate or real estate to have people move into. Going from one of the fastest to one of the middle growth counties. So this is really kind of driven by two things. One is the decisions we've made in Howard County to limit development. The second one is Maryland is really suffering and is not growing as a state as it had in the past.
So on that, then again, just by extension, the last point of your last slide, if our population is growing by 2.2%, but our housing units are only growing by 0.7%, our people per housing unit is going up.
Yeah, most of the growth, as I'm going to do next slide, is or maybe this one after, is okay. From native growth. So population growth, births over deaths. We're not getting a lot of migration in. So slower growth is really kind of driven by this slower migration. Again, in the decade before the 2020s, we had net in-migration, international and domestic, second highest domestic migration. Howard County was attracting residents from other states, also from other parts of Maryland, especially Prince George's, Montgomery County, and lesser extent from the north. We're attracting people coming here because of the schools and quality of life issues. Over the last, since 2020, most of the gain has been from natural growth. This is the issue of births over deaths. The county experienced net domestic out-migration. So we're losing people to out of state, which again is different, or at domestic and to other counties, which is different than in past years. Kind of two stories here. IRS migration data, which is only through 2022, because of the government shutdown, they don't have one more year of data. Howard County tends to gain from other parts of Maryland and higher cost states and IRS data. So we're getting residents mostly from Montgomery, Prince George's, and Baltimore City, but we're losing out migration to Anne Arundel, Carroll, and Frederick. Some of those have lower costs of living and lower housing costs. We're losing to Delaware, Florida, and southern states. This is most likely retirements. We're losing to Virginia, so net migration there, which is, in my opinion, probably jobs related. Census data shows a slightly different picture, which Maryland losing higher income and educated residents, but Howard County gaining both from out of state, but some losses to in-state. But again, that's a survey. IRS is actually hard counts of returns, so it's a little bit more reliable. But again, the question here is migration, domestic out migration, no longer driving us in the same way it was in the past? Again, I'm going to go really fast over here because Jeff talked about it incredibly well. So, the county is aging and the population under 19 is projected to decline. So these tables are all different things that'll be in the report on population growth. But 16% of the county population is 65 and older, and this is expected to increase to 19% in 2034 and over the next decade. Prime working age population fell from 44% in 2011 to 41% in 2024. So we have less prime working age people. And again, prime working age people were 35 to 54. Good news is that's supposed to remain stable through 2024. All of the different models or data sources I've looked at shows our population of school-age children continuing to decline. So I think what's kind of important here is over the next 10 years, the county will add more over 65 residents than it's adding workers to pay taxes to support them. So again, Jeff has covered this. I can answer questions on it, but those are kind of the key findings on population. Here's where we get to the issue of workforce. So this is workforce growth. This is our these are our people in the county who work regardless of where they work. So, the right top is the growth in labor force. The bottom is the growth in employed residents. So labor force are people in work, working, or actively looking for work. Employed residents are residents working. So as you can see, we had kind of a decline, in the COVID recession starting to recover. It had recovered by 2024. However, with the most recent cuts by the end of the year, they had both fallen. And so again, we had finally recovered in terms of the people working and looking for work and people participating in labor. But that, as a worrying sign, fell in 2025 based on 11 months of data, with the 1 month missing because of the government shutdown. Again, this is more than likely Howard County, as I'll discuss at the end, has a high number of federal contractor workers and a high level of federal workers as well. Good news, the county remains the highest income and second lowest poverty jurisdiction in Maryland. Median household incomes are almost $150,000. This is highest in the nation, higher than the nation and higher than Maryland, 9th highest in the nation, up from 10th last year. So we've recovered in this. We had dropped down to about 15th in the nation out of the top 10, but it has since roared back. It's up 7% from 2023. So incomes are growing in the county. Again, different sort. Where is this coming from with labor force issues? It's interesting to tell. Very low poverty rate, second lowest in Maryland after Frederick in both of those. So kind of that's where population. So on the good side, we have high incomes. On the good side, we have relatively high labor force participation. On the negative side, the labor force seems to be impacted by recent federal decisions and Maryland's slow growth. So now jumping into the economy, so again, looking at jobs in the county, regardless of who holds them, and businesses, how is the county economy doing? So economic growth in terms of businesses and jobs are an important driver of county revenues. They account for 17% of the property tax base. Roughly 60%, 58% of county residents work for county employers. Things here are still bad. In 2028 recession, in the 2008 recession, it took 35 months for the county to recover to pre-recession levels. We're 67 months from the pre-recession peak, and we still haven't recovered. We were above it for 1 month in June 2024, but we've since gone down below it. And what's going on here is the county is really being hampered by slow Maryland growth. Maryland is simply not growing well as a state, and recent federal decisions, which again drive both the impacts in the county and the state in terms of slowdowns in federal spending. So Howard County economy has been hard hit by COVID and has not fully recovered. Pre-COVID, the county was ahead of the nation, and the Baltimore and Washington MSAs and private sector employment growth, that's the top kind of looking at us since 2010. The county has done really well. The bottom chart looks at where we were since COVID, and again, Howard County is the purple line with the blocks. And we have still not recovered fully from the COVID recession, and we are lagging the nation and both comparison regions in employment growth. The nation recovered in 2022. The state recovered in February 2024, is now up 2%. The DC metro area and Baltimore metro area both recovered in the last 4 months. Howard County's employment is still down slightly below pre-recession levels. We were hard hit by COVID. Pre-COVID, we were the third fastest growing county in the state in terms of jobs added, fourth in growth rate. Post-COVID, we're the third worst in post-COVID recovery in terms of job loss, seventh worst in terms of jobs decline. So the Howard County economy has not recovered. And again, this has significant impacts on the fiscal outlook for the county. This table you see every year, and I think I confuse everybody every year. This looks at the major industries, the location quotient, which is a concentration of those employment in those industries with a number above 1, meaning above the national average, and then the various growth rates, both historically pre-COVID, post-COVID, and over the next projection over the next 5 years. So you want to look at our specialized industries, which are the bolded ones. And what does Howard County have a specialization in? We have construction activities, wholesale trade, professional and scientific services. The construction activity has declined and is projected to continue to decline in the future. So that driver is going to be more limited in the future. Manufacturing, Maryland does not do well in manufacturing. Howard County does reasonably well. The county had very strong pre-COVID growth, but has fallen by almost a quarter since 2019. However, it is projected to grow and slightly recover over the next 5 years. Resident serving industries, these are things like retail, entertainment, are still below pre-COVID levels in aggregate. So again, it's really these industries that serve the population, although accommodation and food services has recovered. Now, professional services is the real driver of the county economy. These are things like government contractors, IT, accounting services, government consultants, private sector consultants. Industries, companies, people that provide professional services. Now, that has recovered, is highly specialized, almost twice the national average, and is projected to grow. The county had done well in attracting corporate headquarters and back office pre-COVID, but that has since kind of dropped off. And I'm kind of wondering if that is more the impact of slower federal spending and the impact of COVID on a place to work. Maryland is a relatively high cost of living place. Are we not attracting that? Transportation, distribution, and logistics. So warehousing, trucking, those types of things. Strong pre-COVID growth. It recovered in 2024 and is projected to grow. So that's really kind of the Jessup, but other areas as well. Kind of any questions about the economy? I think I went a little too fast, but before I jump into the last part, any
Richard,
questions?
you can go back one slide. The growth in professional services, does that take into account kind of the impact of AI on some of these areas? I know that there's been a big push and that has an effect on some of these professional jobs, particularly entry level. And I see you have there, it's slated for growth in the future, but does that take into account AI?
These are simply the growth projections from Lightcast. AI is a far longer discussion than we can probably do here. I've done a lot of work on digital divide, digital impacts on employment. AI has probably suppressed the future growth rates, but again, I don't think it's wiping out the entire sector. And IT, I don't have the number memorized, but professional services includes other things as well as IT. But IT is a very big component, especially in Howard County, of professional services. But it's not the core driver of it. It is a driver. It is an important driver. I'm not minimizing it. But the professional services can grow as a sector, even if IT services decline. And the impacts of IT on the whole sector, I think we could write a book about. Maybe put that in the discussion phase, or we can go offline on that.
Hey, Dr. Clash,
Yeah, thanks.
I wanted to follow on with a question about wholesale trade, which I see is bolded in the table. Can you just describe a little bit more about that particular growth area?
Sure. I kind of lump wholesale trade in with what I call transportation, distribution, and logistics. So it would include that as well as transportation and warehousing. So wholesale trade are businesses that sell products to other businesses, often retail. So it's your wholesalers. In Howard County, our high concentration of activity in this is very much related to Jessup. So it's related to the wholesale food distribution. Lots of it happening in Jessup, but there's lots of other. So also Amazon fulfillment centers would be in transportation, distribution, logistics, mostly in the warehousing. So it's businesses that hold or sell businesses, mostly goods and goods to other businesses, and also increasingly with the home delivery to homes.
Right. Okay. I was just curious if international trade was a growth component of that line. So,
to the extent we distribute out of the Port of Baltimore, yes, which is something we do. So international trade is a component there. Maryland is not a huge exporter or importer. It's mostly an area of transshipment related to the port, and Jessup has a fair share of that. I have not looked at it in detail in Jessup.
oh, thank you.
So kind of going into the real estate conditions, I look kind of at two major things, residential and non-residential. In residential, the good news is prices remain very strong. Bad news is because the units are down from high, we have a low inventory, as we heard about earlier. Permitting down is down in multifamily, is up as a share. Non-residential, it was very strong in 2018 to 2022. It declined in 2023. It roared back to life in 2024, mostly from a very large APL permit, and then declined again in 2025. But there's only about 8 months of data left or available for 2025 from the Met Council. So it could catch up. That permit for 2024 came after I presented last year. So again, looking at residential here, this is the real estate market using realtors data. There's the median sales price grew from 605,000 to 620,000 in 2025. That's the second highest price in Maryland. Last year, we were the second highest in appreciation as well. Now we have slowing appreciation in the county, and other counties are experiencing growth and appreciation at higher rates. But again, we're the second highest housing cost jurisdiction. The inventory is low, as we heard about earlier. There's about 1 month of inventory. This is the lowest in Maryland. Roughly 3,400 units sold, which has been essentially flat. We've been stable at about 3,400 units for the past 3 years. Again, down from the 4,000s and 5,000s in the years before then. Kind of looking at residential development activity. Permitting on the top right is continuing its downward trend, so we're getting less permitting activity. Bottom left, of that permitting activity, multifamily is significantly increasing as its share there. And again, that has an impact, as you've heard me say last year, for those of you on the committee, in that people who live in multifamily, it can be condos, but it's largely renter occupied. They have much lower incomes, but not much lower family sizes. So their demand on services can be comparable to somebody who lives in a single family house, but they're paying much less in taxes. So as we get a higher share of multifamily, this is going to be something we're going to have increasing numbers of people with lower incomes than the people in single family homes, but relatively not that much less demand for services. What was interesting is there was about a 10% increase in the incomes in renter-occupied people in the American Community Survey. You're not supposed to treat that like time series, but it is interesting to note that there was that big bump. Maybe there's a change in the composition. We'll see if that holds next year.
Dr. Clinch, this is Barb again. On income tax, it just struck me, I wondered if you knew this number. What percent of those who should pay income tax in the county?
I have no idea of that number. I mean, it would be it's a relatively low instance of people who don't pay income tax, and
Right.
I have no idea, because Maryland has a much higher instance of people who work for big employers, and I mean people who get W-2s. I believe we
Right.
probably have a lower than national instance of tax avoidance
Right.
than other places, but that's me randomly giving thoughts. I have zero facts to back that up.
Okay, I was just curious. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Hey, Richard,
Yep.
if you go back one, so you said there was an increase in average income for those people who were in
Renter occupied.
rental units in the county, right?
Yes.
Do you think that could be related to the fact that there's not as much in the way of inventory, so more people with higher incomes are going into apartments? Plus, you have something like Meriwether, where the rents ain't cheap, so you got to be making a lot of money to live in one of those things.
Yeah, it could be the changing composition. It could be people moving into the county into rentals as they look for a house. It could be all of those things. Again, I just worry about 1 year changes of that magnitude on a survey. Even even census data, community survey data, it can be an aberration, or it can be the beginning of a trend. So I mention it because I think it's important. And Steve, I think you've hit the reasons on the head. However, I'm just not sure that next year it won't drop because of things. There have just been some issues with the American Community Survey and how they count things. There have been real issues in the last year or two raised about data quality. So I highlight it. I hope it's the beginning of a trend, but I highlight it because it's important and we should take note of it. But I worry whether it's really correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
I have a question. This is Jackie McCoy. My question is about the renting versus owning. Is it that the county is just permitting more rental development that we are in this situation? Because again, those boxes that we build, like the Meriwether district, is there a reason why there's not more owner development, ownership versus, development of rental properties?
Dense. I think Jeff hit that. Jeff spent an entire presentation on the whole issue of us running out of land. So as you move towards denser form, I wish I could get this data for condos, but it's just not available the way the ACS runs without, and I'm not even sure I would get a sample size if I got the micro data. So again, there can be some, condos in owner occupied. But the issue is, as you move to a denser style of development, which is what the county is moving towards, you get a higher instance of condos and multifamily, and we're permitting more of it, which has to do with running out of land for single family development.
Right, but that's what I'm asking. Why is it that versus condos and apartments, why is it that there's more interest in developing rental property than developing condo ownership properties?
Yeah, condos are, that's a study in and of itself. The condo market has been kind of high hit by interest rates. And I don't know why the relative mix in the county of that. I mean, that would be a question we could ask Jeff.
Yeah,
Jackie,
I
hi,
remember.
this is Jennifer. I've talked to developers about this, and it's like, so the ability to kind of build apartments versus houses, townhome, it's like market driven. So they're going to enter into something in it's a financial for them. They got to borrow the money. They got to partner with people, and they just do whatever's the best return. So developers right now are like, condos are not financially viable, right? So the county doesn't really force people to build one thing over the other. It's totally market driven. Developers will build what they think the market can absorb and what they can make a return on. And so right now, condos are not, I think there's like a couple condo buildings now, but the reason why none have been built since a couple downtown is because the return, like the financial return, it's hard for a developer to get their return back.
Yeah, that's exactly what I heard from DPZ. Is saying it's a market driven, and developer make a decision regarding what kind of housing can leverage more in terms of returns there, and that just happened to be not doing good for condo.
Also, sometimes builders will do an apartment and then they do a conversion later. The funding up front can be more difficult on a condo is my understanding. But conversions happen.
That's correct.
Many of our condos in this community have been conversions.
All right, just jumping on to the last part, which is non-residential permitting. This is employment space, so Maple Lawn, downtown, other types of space. You know, from 2018 to 2022, we had substantial non-residential permitting activity. Fell in 2023. It came roaring back in 2024, with mostly driven by one building at APL, or maybe one permit at APL, but could have been multiple buildings. Fell again in 2025 year to date. What's going on? Again, we could talk for a whole day on demand factors for non-residential development, but I mean, impact of COVID is long term. It's less office space per worker, changes in retail demand, mean less storefronts, more online purchases. However, and those are all decreasing demand for non-residential development, but you're also getting more suburban office space demand, which is where workers are because they don't want to commute to downtown areas. So that benefits Howard County. But I think we've all talked about how various employers have reduced their footprints in the county, in the region, in downtown areas. Also, a big issue here is federal contractor demand, which I'll hit on in a minute. So key takeaways, as Dr. Irani talked about, you know, the national economy has some warning signs, but the national economy is growing. Inflation seems to be relatively under control. At the state level, you know, both Dr. Irani and I have talked about, you know, Maryland is really in the doldrums economically. That impacts two of the three drivers of the county, which is, I mean, employment growth and population growth. If there's no jobs being created in Maryland, nobody's moving to the state of Maryland, which means that fewer people are moving to Howard County, because Howard County is always an attractive place for those that do move in, and for those that are moving from other, you know, lower service jurisdictions, especially say Prince George's or higher problem-ish, jurisdictions like Montgomery County. Howard County conditions: moderating population growth, aging population, all negatives. Projected decline in under 19 population. So again, less possibly translating into less demand for capital projects in schools and things like that. IRS outmigration is worrying. The census is less so. The lack of an employment recovery in the Howard County economy remains. And a key question we have to ask ourselves in Maryland and in Howard County is, what is the county's future economic driver going to be? In the past, it has really been a lot of federal contracting moving into the county, you know, driven by its excellent location and proximity to Fort Meade. You know, the question is, and the state is grappling with this, is can innovation replace federal contracting as a driver of the state's economy? And Howard County really does have APL, but it doesn't have a kind of an innovation driver in the same way resident in the county. You're in the middle of drivers in College Park, Baltimore City, Fort Meade. You're in the middle of these drivers, but you don't have them resident in the county. So again, what will be the driver? And I'm posing, I wish I had an answer. And, you know, again, the slowdown in development. So key takeaways: we should be cautious because our population at the state level is not growing. You know, we have lagging workforce growth, slowing population growth, aging population. The economy has not yet recovered in Howard County, so that's the reason to be cautious. Real estate, you know, less residential development means less growth in property tax revenues and one-time fees. Less non-residential development means fewer places to bring employers into, and again, lower growth in commercial properties, property tax assessments. Reasons to be cheerful: again, population. You know, we have aging population means demand, but it also means less demand for schools. Does have moderating growth in capital needs. You know, employment, you know, the county remains a very attractive place. We have among the most highly educated populations in the state, certainly in the country. Strong growing professional services sector, again, pre-federal cuts, which I'll get to. And again, real estate, attractive location with opportunities for redevelopment in downtown Columbia, Gateway, Route 1 corridor. So you know, all there's reasons to be cautious and reasons to be cheerful. So jumping into my projections, you know, last year's projection, you know, we projected 5.7% growth in personal income. Was 5.9, so it slightly beat expectations. You know, but again, we're predicting kind of a return to the norm of the 4% growth, which, we have been exceeding for the last couple of years as these things come, we've talked about in terms of federal contracting, slow growth at the state level come home to roost. When will the Howard County economy finally recover? I've been saying it for 2 years. I've been wrong for 2 years. Hopefully we're very close. Again, we hit it in a couple months ago, but we should, recover in terms of employment in the county soon, and we will continue to do better than the state through 2030. Because that's my personal income projections. Before I go to risk factors, because I think I'm hitting on my time, do we have any questions? Or Holly, do you want me to do the risk factors real quick? Or
No, you have enough time. Go ahead.
have enough time. Any questions before I jump in? Great, I'll just jump in. So these are the same factors last year, just the numbers have been updated. What are the things that can really derail and have really, frankly, been a contributor to the lack of recovery in Howard County? And that is the slow growth in Maryland. Maryland is simply not growing as a state. We're 35th in employment growth, 37th in gross state product growth. We're 35th in population growth over the last 5 years. So we are typically in a middle to high performing state. Again, this is an impact of a variety of things. Most importantly, the federal cuts that are occurring, but also decisions we've made as a state on taxes and other things that have had long-term growth and impacts on growth and employment. Now, the growth projections for the next 5 years from Moody's are much worse than last year. Moody's expects us to be 38th in employment growth over the next 5 years, down from 35th last year, 47th in gross state product growth. So relatively low economic growth, down from 34th last year, 27th in population growth. So again, they're predicting that not only has slow growth been a problem at the state level and certainly impacting us at the county, but is going to continue for the next 5 years. So again, adding to the reasons to be cautious. The second one is the state and county reliance on federal spending. So I looked at 3 areas of federal spending at the state and county level. I looked at federal employment. So this is employment by place of work. So this is people working at NIH or people working at Fort Meade. And Maryland is, in terms of the federal jobs, is 5th. We have 238,000 people who work for the federal government in 2024. That has been dropped by almost 15 to 20,000 from the stuff we've read about with the DOGE cuts. That impacts Maryland in an outsized way because we are the 5th highest state in the nation in terms of federal jobs and 4th highest in terms of the concentration of federal jobs. Second, I looked at federal employment by place of residence. So this is not where you work, but where you live. So Maryland has lots of people who work in DC for the federal government, in Virginia for the federal government. So Maryland has 340,000 rounding up people who work for the federal government. That's the 4th highest number in the nation. And we're 2nd highest in terms of the concentration of federal jobs, people who work for the federal government after DC, and other states, much lower. Then federal procurement. This is purchases of goods and services from suppliers located within the state or county. The federal government purchases about $36 billion in goods and services from Maryland companies. That's the 5th highest. The federal government purchases $5,800, again, rounding up, of goods and services from companies in Maryland for every person who resides in Maryland. That's the 6th highest concentration. So again, looking at this at the county level, we don't have that many federal jobs in the county. So that first one's, only 2% of jobs in the county. That's lower than the national average, much lower than the state average, are jobs in the county. But when you look at where people work who live in the county, 11% of Howard County's workforce works for the federal government. That's the 7th highest concentration in Maryland, and the 5th in the number of federal jobs. And then federal procurement, again, we are the 4th highest, $4.3 billion in goods and services purchased from Howard County. almost $12,500 per person residing in the county, so much higher than the state's average. So federal contractors have been driving the Howard County economy, and as that's a worrying sign going forward. Kind of looking at these risk factors, this is procurement over time on the left-hand side. You saw there's a huge COVID bump. So again, $4.3 billion in services, but this is down, almost 15% from 2024. So that's one of the reasons the economy hasn't recovered. Our large federal contracting base is losing contracts. What is purchased in Howard County? It's almost entirely professional services. So it's A&E, architecture and engineering, IT, and scientific research, which is APL. So again, good news is these are good jobs. The bad news is they're declining. Who are the federal contractors in Maryland? Again, the graph on the left is the same one as before, but it's largely APL. So we are lucky in this county to have APL, which is a real government contracting driver and can possibly be that answer or part of that answer to how the county can transition to a innovation-based economy, because we do have APL, which is kind of the second largest driver of academic R&D in the state of Maryland. It's part of Johns Hopkins, but alone it would be the second. It's bigger than either of the college USM campuses. So real fast, that's maybe too fast, maybe too much. That's my presentation. Any questions?
Yeah,
I try to do it fast so we can talk.
Yeah, Richard. Have the Doge cuts run their course, and have we weathered that storm? I mean, that was a huge issue for us last year. But
I know I wish I knew. Other than having relatives who work for the federal government, including one at OMB, I have no secret information. I mean, I think the worst of it's over, but statistically speaking, they haven't all shown up yet. So we had that whole question of deferred, the people who took retirement didn't show up until, after October. Some of them didn't even show up yet. So the worst is probably over in announcements, but statistically speaking, we'll be struggling with it at the employment end in the near term. And on the contracting end, I'm not sure that federal contracting will recover in the same way in the near term. So that will continue to be a drag, and the worst is not over statistically speaking. Cuts from last year in terms of multi-year contracts will show up this year. A partially spent contract in last federal fiscal year is showing up. The full impact of a reduction statistically won't show up till next quarter. On a good news here, we do have about $4.3 billion in federal contracting. This does not include NSA. That data is secret. Obviously, we don't know what NSA purchases, so this is probably a significant undercount for. So the federal procurement data system does not track secret purchases for obvious reasons. So the good news here is, these numbers are low.
thank
Yeah,
you.
but NSA would be declining too, presumably. I mean, I've heard anecdotal stories that NSA contracting and Intel community contracting is declining, and there's targeting of the largest contractors there, like the Booz Allens. They sent a tweet saying that they're going to try to decimate their contracting. So, none of it's good.
I think it's certainly better to be an NSA contractor than an AID contractor. So, one's gone, one's getting cut, and we have an above Anne Arundel, Howard, Montgomery, PG all have outsized shares of NSA contracting, based on kind of the BRAC studies that have been done. So that's it. I don't know if it's good news, bad news, indifferent news, fast news. I gave it fast, but any other questions?
Even because the state is slow or declining, even if we got rid of every process regulation to try to develop and build more in Howard County, would we just be building vacant buildings because there's just not enough growth coming into the state?
Well, the state is growing. It's just not growing anything near where it was or should be. So in my opinion, if you got, if you suddenly opened up all of the, closed land from agricultural preserve for single family high-end housing, you could fill most of it. Because Howard County has a vector of desirable things. People still move into states that are declining in population. They move into the desirable areas. And Howard County is desirable in a slow growth, is probably among the most, if not the most attractive county for a variety of reasons in a state that isn't growing. So it always gets more an outsized share of the state. So again, the state isn't, Youngstown, Ohio, which is in long-term
Right.
decline.
Or
The
Columbus,
state's just
Ohio.
not growing.
Like,
Columbus is actually booming.
Okay.
But
I was just saying,
so,
like, we're the nicest part of a stagnating place.
correct. Howard County. Yes, that's a good way to put it. I might steal that. Howard County is the nicest part of a stagnating state. So, and the state, I do not know at the state level what will return the state to growth. So,
But it seems as if the county's performance is lagging the state in many areas, and it's almost like we're reverting to state average over time, because even though we're statistically at an advantage, we're not outperforming like we were in the past.
we're behind in economics, which again, I think is really this contractor issue. So economic growth in the county. So the county's business growth is really lagging. And that I think is the story of federal contracting. Because that was a driver, and also the COVID impacts in terms, we had very high end, we had a very bifurcated economic development market in terms of lots of retail, lots of professional services, and not a lot in between. And clearly manufacturing and Jessup and manufacturing distribution and Jessup were doing well. But again, there's places of the state doing far, far worse than Howard County. I like Josh's, the bright spot of a stagnating state, rather than our population growth is slowing, but it's still relatively strong, and it's mostly higher income. So again, I'm not sure to say we're reverting to the mean yet.
Dr. Clench, this is Barb, Glenn. I have to go back. It's my duty to go back to your comment regarding if we open up all the preserved ag land, we could cover all our growth needs. I believe that's.
No, I said we could sell it all. I'm not saying it's a good idea.
Yeah, we could sell it. And that, okay. In your day-to-day, how often is that the key point that everybody's bringing up? I've heard multiple times that we have no land left. So I always am curious just how much is this becoming sort of the tip of the spear?
I would say that it's not the issue that anybody talks about, but what I'm saying is we've made a policy choice to put 30% of the county off limits to development. And that has implications for development of single family homes, which I think you could sell like hotcakes in the county if you wanted to. But it's a policy choice. I am not saying get rid of it. I lived on the border of it. I'm simply saying if you got rid of it, especially in some places closer to Maple Lawn and things like that, you could build single family homes if that's what you wanted.
Absolutely. No, I get that. I really was just curious how often or how quickly is this going to come before the Howard County leadership and then be, a threat.
Even in Montgomery County, where it became binding much earlier because they did it earlier and bigger. I don't think it's even come up. So they're probably 10 years ahead of us in terms of I'm not sure it's come up in any, but again, I don't work that much for the developer community in either of those counties. But again, I just, as a consumer of information related to real estate trends and an economist who does lots of real estate economic development, real estate work, it's not come up. I'm simply saying if you wanted to build single family homes and you could change the zoning, you could build them,
Yeah.
and people would buy them in this county.
They would, yeah. Okay, that's great. I really appreciate the input. Thank you so much.
All right. So
Holly, I don't know
thanks
if
so
I'm
much.
on schedule, off schedule, or did a good job or bad job, but I'm done. We can.
Yes, you did great. Thank you, Dr. Clinch. And these are all great discussion and great questions too. So that's good. All right, so let me move to the revenue and outlook update. Let's put on the screen. All right. All right, so I'll get started. So I actually put a theme here as challenges and opportunities, which is different from last year. Last year, if you remember, actually, I put a picture, a foggy picture there, because that's when federal government started to make a lot of announcements and layoffs, all those things there. And I remember one of committee member was making a comment, say, when we're in such a high uncertain escalated risk there, it's kind of want to paddle and like break and then slow down a little bit until we understand what's going to happen on that. So last year, the tone was very cautious, rightfully, because of all this unknown and a lot of like news that suggests a huge impact on it. Now, this year, things are a little bit different now. We did went through all kinds of drama last year, but now it's actually have a mixed bag of information, just like what Dr. Lynch also mentioned in his presentation. I remember one of the slides he just shown was like, what are some of the challenge, including long-term, job growth, their employment, population, and other things there, and near-term, but also there are what are really the strengths and opportunities here. So mine is kind of like a very similar about we are having challenges here, but actually, interestingly, I will show you that the immediate fiscal outlook year to year, which actually is pretty strong, although it's still in the trend of moderating towards historical moderate level, but at least immediately in near future, we have opportunity to take the chance and we're still relatively good. What are the things we can do? I guess I hope the whole committee can think about that there, that could help us position ourselves for a longer term and hopefully sustain some of the growth rather than kind of going back to the trend that's not able to support all those needs of the community. So on the continued challenges part is that we do still face the impact of both federal and state actions or policies here. Last year, if you recall that the state in its own effort to close a huge gap at the state level, they shifted $8 to $9 million to counties here, and that's including pension for some education entities here. And this year, just based on what governor's proposal, they will likely be another 6 million-ish shift to the county, and also that's including, again, education liabilities here that was originally shouldered by the state to local governments for education entities there, but also MSDE, the Maryland, the State Department of Education, was going to charging the local match of the private pre-K amount to local governments there. So that's all added to the new cost if everything goes as what's proposed currently. And on federal actions here, obviously we are continue to face the uncertainties here and the risks here and still kind of navigate through those broad impact there. The broad impact there, they're multifold there. Obviously, there's an impact on the economy, employment, and the overall market, and it impacts both residents and business nonprofits here. We learned from Maryland recently that through November, for those Maryland that works directly for federal government on their payroll, about a little more than 15% of them already lost their jobs. So that was pretty significant. That doesn't include a contractor, which is very hard. There's no data, reliable data available. Some people were speculating that could be equally or like a proxy to that number, but we really don't have a good number through that. But that, as I think Dr. Clinch also mentioned, that it's going to take time to transfer to the receipts like income tax receipts, etc. So far, that has not been reflected yet, mostly because of timing. Most of those separation happened towards the end of last calendar year, and because of timing is not reflecting payroll, and then usually income tax takes a couple years to reconcile as well. So through reporting, tax filing, etc. So it's going to take a while there. So far it hasn't been reflected much at all, but it is going to reflect in some manner. And then on the expenditure side or service side, the county has been taking a lot of actions throughout last year. I know our chief of staff, Angela, and also EDA lead mentioned earlier that the county has been actively providing job fairs, workforce development assistance, and train folks there laid off or to find out other jobs there and turn them into entrepreneurs. A lot of efforts has been happening, and also assist people with utility needs, rental payment, all those things continues to impact the government service currently. On the positive side, the county's two critical revenue sources there. I didn't show the pie chart, but if you recall, property tax, income tax make up about 90% of the total county general fund revenues. And the good news is assessment base remains strong. Here's the assessment growth every year in the last, I think you're about 20-year period of time there. So the latest report from State Department of Assessment Taxation, we're still projecting slightly over 4%, which is good. Now, if you take a closer look, it does start to show some trending down in terms of the growth level, but over 4%, that's still higher than historical level. The last 2 decades average is a little more than 2% a year. And as you know, the Maryland has a triennial reassessment and the phasing approach. So overall, the growth trend started to lose momentum, but it's going to take a little while. So at this point, we're still above historical average, and near future we will, but we are kind of more moving towards historical average there based on the existing trend. The most recent reassessment here was showing the same thing there. So reassessment growth slows down compared to the last couple years from the peak there, but remains positive. So in the next couple years, however, that could continue the softening because the housing price still remains high, but it's not growing as fast compared to a couple years ago. So that's going to impact the future years' performance there. But so far, so good, still very solid. Okay, so here's the different factors impact a county's property tax here. We talk about real estate appreciation and the triennial reassessment that's kind of like smoothed those annual changes there. There's also foregone revenues that was actually including the homestead credit, which caps the owner-occupied house growth at 5% per year in terms of taxing purpose for the county's property tax year, which kind of helps smooth this even further. There are also other credits in recent years that has been provided more generous and higher tax credit for like aging in place is one of the examples there. So that's kind of mitigate some of the overall accessible growth there in terms of tax revenue, in terms of net revenue growth there. Commercial property base here, as Dr. Clinch also mentioned earlier, that has been lagging behind residential. So the slide showed earlier about reassessment, its 3-year total is double digit, but for commercial property base part, the 3-year growth is only 7.6%. So that has been lower compared to residential. So everybody has mentioned earlier that one of the ways is to I guess figure out a way, try to boost the commercial base that probably can carry us in a long way. We continue to face different uncertainties here. There's some losing momentum on the real estate market there. There was affordability issue. Mortgage rates has been trending down now, but still remain historically high, and supply constraint remains there. So we have very little new constructions for a couple years in a row now, and permits remain very low. that's going to continue to impact the future new buildings assessment that could be added to the base on that there. Commercial base, we already talked about earlier, both retail and also office space there. Those continue to be stressed currently. And obviously federal actions there, we are a little bit less exposed than some other counties that has big federal buildings there on that end there, but that still continue to impact overall, including people's like payrolls, whether you can afford it, that all those things there.
Hey, Holly, this is Barb. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the general tenor of all the presentations we've heard regarding taxes and reassessing property tax has been, hey, this is great. We're increasing. We've gone, we're up to what, 15% increase or something like that, double digits. But that's a tax on our citizens, right? And contributes to
Correct.
lack
Correct.
of affordability. I hope I'm right about that. Is that correct?
You're right.
So
You're
we're
right.
really
So,
excited
yeah,
about this, right?
yeah, I'll
Okay.
explain that. Thank you. Yeah. So the most recent area, I think it's group 2, get reassessed, was showing a little more than 15% increase from 3 years ago. And the state will phase in that in next 3 years. So on average, it's kind of, and then, so that's about 5% a year. And the county has a homestead tax credit. So for tax purpose, say if your property match that average, then your reason the reassessment bill you saw got from SDAT is, well, your property now is like 15% higher than 3 years ago, but then it's got facing in next 5 years, and a little more than 5% actually. But then if you are owner occupied, you live in that house rather than you rent it out for investment income, then your annual tax bill increase is capped at 5%. So that's kind of it try to protect it to be resident to be no more than 5% a year. But to your point, it is true, you still pay more. So as taxpayer, unless you sell the house, one day you live in there, you pay those increase every year. And that's your, that actually, it is true, it's a tax burden for
Right, but it
taxpayer.
does,
Even tax rate is the same, you do pay more tax every year.
and does it translate to increased value of your property then directly? If you want to sell it?
It's based on the property assessment. Like, so when
Right.
the state say it's increased 15% from 3 years ago, that's typically reflected in your house value already on that.
Right.
But it's
Okay.
looking back, not looking forward, and then you get phased in for tax purpose in a lagging kind of pattern like that.
Okay. All right.
But if you have investment house, it's different. It's reflected pretty much the close to the market value, no longer have those cap of 5% increase for tax purpose for annual growth.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Holly, on the residential assessments and versus value, is there a way, a mechanism now in place? We talked about this, it was 5-6 years ago, easily, where we had assessed values, let's say at $700,000, and the house would sell for $1 million, but the house would then, the assessed value would never catch up to the market value as evidenced by the sale price of a house. Has that changed?
So there are two things related to that. So one is the one SDAT assessed that I think it's close to market value, but not at the market value. They have a mechanism there. It's close, but not exactly at market. That's one thing. The second thing is that for tax purpose there, once you sell the house, now they get reassessed. And at that point, it should be fairly close to market value. So if you live in a house there, because the homestead there, even the market say your house is probably already $1 million, but because you live in the house there for a long time and you have the homestead protection every year, the gross for assessment cannot be more than 5%. You might still pay say $850,000 there because it's you are still catching up. But if you sell the house on the market, the new owner is going to pay close to $1 million, like assessment for taxing purpose. You no longer enjoy those kind of buffer from the homestead credit.
So in effect, the mechanism now is the property largely gets marked to market based on the new sale price of the house.
Right.
So if SDAT has it at 700 and it sells for 1.2, SDAT at the next valuation cycle is going to be assessing it closer to the 1.2 than the
Correct.
700.
Correct.
And the new owner, irrespective of whether or not they file the Homestead Act exemption, is going to pay property taxes on the new
At the
assessed value.
higher level,
1.2.
right? And that's why the
Okay.
home sales activity, if we have less home sales for whatever reason, less supply, people don't want to
Right.
move because mortgage, it impact the assessable base as well because you don't have too much turnover. Not only less new construction, which could add to the add value, which is not there, but also less activity to free up the value to more market value.
So if we were to go through the SDAT records now, homes that have sold within the last 3 years, meaning kind of in the new triannual assessment cycle, should rarely be very much off the sale price that's reflected, the last sale price that's reflected in the SDAT records. So if it's been reassessed since the last sale of the house, the assessed value and the sale price should be very close to one another.
Right. It's more recent, probably.
Right. Okay.
This is Barb again. I raised this last year, I think. In the agricultural area, we have real issues with SDAT, who has totally changed their equation for assessing agricultural facilities. And so one of our farmers in Howard County went from an assessed tax of just, I don't know how much it was, tens of thousands to over $1 million, because SDAT completely changed their equation, if you will. I'll use that term. And this is a challenge across the state right now, and we're working on it legislatively and in terms of just policy. So I just thought I don't know if other industries are having, commercial industries are having that issue, but when SDAT decides, and they don't know anything about agriculture, that's number one. Number two, they come in and change just, all of a sudden, a massive change, no phase-ins, no nothing. That's a real tough one for our farmers. So thank you. I just thought I'd share.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that
Thanks.
there. There's something else I noticed there since we talk about SDAT on that is that I'm less familiar on the agricultural part, but I do know for multi-years now, we heard and learned that there are appeals. It's a lot of commercial appeals on assessment there. And from what we heard, that actually as that doesn't have enough personnel or expertise or time, or whatever, it's actually, I think a lot of time it just root along with what was appealed at there. There's not, it seems to be not enough process to challenge some of the appeal to lower the value for the commercial part on that. That's at least that's from different sources what I heard, but SDAT saying they really don't have time, they're very busy, they
Right.
they don't have all those to prepare to participate with a lot of time to kind of challenge those appealing from the commercial side.
Yeah.
Well,
I need to speak up because we have a new leadership in SDAT, and I understand things, and communication is much more robust, and I would say on a more positive trend, but it's still hard for the one industry that we call agriculture. So thank you, Holly, for letting me.
Todd, I think you want to add something?
yeah, I was just going to say that's actually absolutely true that SDAT can't keep up, and the irony is the state's charging you interest on your account while you're going through an appeals process that never ends. So you're getting farther and farther behind while you're waiting for the state to do something that it's never doing. The but that's nothing more than a gripe and an anecdote. But it's definitely true that SDAT doesn't have the staff to appropriately manage those appeals.
Yeah. Okay, so wrap up the property tax there. So we continue to be strong currently. It's just kind of losing a little momentum, but it's going to take time to gradually come down. Income tax, it's continued to be very challenging to do the projection. Its actual performance, it's all over the place with high volatility. Before the pandemic, the average is 3.4%, and the annual performance is somewhere typically between 3 to 4 point some percentage. It's not like a huge changes there. The last few years during and post pandemic, that's completely different. They could be a -6 and they could be positive 11%. So that's like the swing between the years is like 16 to 17% difference between one year and another. It's very, very challenging on that. There's a lot of factors. I think I mentioned at the first kickoff meeting is that it's no longer dry primarily about the personal income. In the long-term trend, it's still pretty close. So because like a 4%, 5% average, that's still close. But when it comes individual years, there's a lot of other swing factors there. It used to be the federal stimulus, and then the more recent years, the capital gains and a reconciliation number because of lagging, that could be a huge difference there. So that makes a lot of challenging. So 25 was extremely strong, and it's not only us across Maryland. In a time when the federal government taking all those actions there, everybody was surprised about the huge surplus on that. So we all have been kind of bothering the state controller's office, try to figure out what's happening. And they think they only have part of the answers because a lot of data are not even available by this time there. But one part is we talk about is lagging of the federal impact. So that has not been reflected yet in general in these tax collection and distribution. And one part is reconciliation. These are very wild. In 24, that dropped a lot, but in 25 for the county, it's come back by more than $40 million there. And off that, a portion is really truly one time. We even have like 15 million-ish from back tax year 2021 lagged reconciliation on that there. So that part is not there, but the other part and the capital gains also going off the roof. I think they mentioned 2024, I think, the statewide, their capital gains up by 40%. Again, last year, 25 is also pretty good, but who knows what's going to happen for future years. So far, so good, but how much is sustainable is a big question mark currently. So the factors for income tax we were to talk about, the fundamentals is main drivers, still a lot of what Dr. Clinch talked about, the jobs, the wage, residential population growth on that in general are still very solid individual years because the federal leave and other things, their private sector that could get some impact, but the overall trend is still solid, I would say, at least in near future there, but a lot of other temporary factors kind of can swing it, adding very dramatic changes between individual years there. Now, personal income, Dr. Klein just mentioned that it is remain strong. It does come back from the peak that was in the bar. The blue bar is the actual personal income growth percentage wise. You can see that traditionally somewhere hovering between 3 to 4 point some percentage before pandemic. During the pandemic period of time, it really go up there because of all this one-time factor we talk about. And since then has been trending down. And in 2025, 26, the estimate is about 3.8%. And the current estimate, as Dr. Clint just mentioned, that remains slightly over 4% on average in out years there, which is still very good if you compare to historical level on that. It's kind of losing some momentum, but fairly solid.
Hey, Holly.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, can you go back a slide? Would it be possible and be it actually go to the ones with the bar graphs?
This
Just the one you just did.
This one?
that one.
Okay.
I don't know if this would be possible, but it would be interesting to know what were the projections in those back years so that we, you know, it would be interesting to know how accurate actuals were to projections.
I think Dr. Clinch just shared that like what was projected previously versus this is personal income there. It's usually
Right.
doesn't off too much, you know, half a percentage
Okay.
point or something. It's not like huge swing between year to year because you can see that this personal income does not swing too much. It's each like it's 3 to 4, 4 to 5. It's if it's a different actual versus projection, it's usually within 1 percentage point, like half percentage point or something. It's not huge. The issue is this is personal income, but your income tax there. Here, you know, you have 5%, 6% growth. That year might you have a negative 6% for income tax. The other you have 4 to 5 of personal income growth, but then income tax you have 11% increase. That is the huge disparity on that because of this one-time impact. For all other factors kind of play a role that actually become more drivers of the change between years, and even state distribution factor, because the state are doing their best to base on the collection, but also their estimate about how much they own the counties there. But then they wouldn't know until almost 2 years, 3 years later about what's the final, and then they will try to redistribute. So that also caused those swings as well. It's very complex, different factors on that there. But for the personal income there, I believe Dr. Clinch's track record is fairly close. It's usually within 1 percentage points difference there.
Thanks.
Yeah. And we also, another thing to reemphasize, if you compare us to the state is represented by the yellow bar, is that we used to be doing better than the state, pretty obviously. You can see that there. But then on the last few years, we actually have been either at or sometimes slower than that. So we're pretty close, I guess. We're pretty close. We no longer have clear leading advantage. We're getting closer to what they are doing. Dr. Clinch, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue is when you get back, you had much more population growth and attracting higher income. That meant that you were attracting, you know, more people than the state on average with higher incomes. That led to stronger personal income growth. Then kind of over the last 3 years, so really since 2021, you know, with the charts I've shown, you know, Howard County actually had in some years more than the state, people leaving the workforce, more than the state leaving employment. So as a result, we had relatively lower income growth and, you know, same or lower population growth than the state on average, leading to, again, this transition. But I think generally speaking, in the long term, we generally speaking are slightly above the state and, you know, are likely to return to that and did in 2024. If that came even close to answering the question.
Yeah, thank you. So then when it comes down to risk factors there, obviously we're very worried and continue to be so about the potential federal impact on that there. So the state was reporting losing close to 15% of its federal workers there. So if we use the same percentage, and given the fact that currently in the county about 11% of the of its residents are working on federal jobs directly, if we use that calculation, if that down 15%, then that means about 1.7% of the total county's residential employment on that there. So that's based on the number through November 2025. If we mirror the state's average, because they don't have the data for individual counties there. And then as we know that, and somebody was alluded that may not be the end of that. So there are still hopefully much less, but they could still be shake off across different federal agencies here. So that that may not be the end of it. The other part is procurement. Again, we don't have the reliable data on that. We do have 4.3 billion procurement, as Dr. Lynch mentioned earlier, but it has been coming down, and so that it's reasonable to guess there will be some impact on federal contract. Even anecdotally, I heard people working for federal government agency, their contract either are gone or they were told to be gone in near future. So they may still be there for now, but soon they might lose jobs on that there. So that will have impact too. So now when we built original FY26 budget, we actually built in some assumption for a negative 2.5% of potential impact. So far it hasn't been reflected yet, but based on this data, I think that's probably a pretty reasonable guess when you look at actually what's happening or likely to happen between direct and non-direct federal impact. Yeah. So Dr. Clinch, go ahead.
And I also wanted to raise the point that the 4.3 is the procurement in the county. Howard County residents are also highly employed in professional services, which in Maryland is in largely government contracting based. So lots of people who commute to jobs in DC, in Montgomery County, in Prince George's County, in Anne Arundel also work for government contractors. So it's not just the $4.3 billion, which is down from $5 billion, but the state is down $5 billion. The state is down about $5 billion, and lots of those jobs are jobs that people from Howard County commute to hold. So again, it's not just it's worse on that front too. You're missing one more piece of worrying news.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's absolutely right on that, because as you said, the people are residents or could be working on the contract in other neighborhood jurisdictions here. So we just have to keep an eye on that, and we'll mention later that we actually did still keep that assumption there in the base on that too. Other key revenues there, interest income, we know that it has been very strong, and based on most updated projection from financier, it will come down, but still at higher than historical level. So that the trend is not doing good, but in terms of absolute dollar value, that's still not bad at all. And the reason, obviously, I was directly related to federal interest rate cuts. And from what we learned, it's a more hawkish new federal chair. So it is possible there will be some interest rate reduction. So that's factored in the preliminary projections here. There are some real estate or home sales related tax surcharge and permits. Those in general are not doing good. Current year, some are actually undergoing quite some decrease there. It's in general believed that we'll probably likely to see either flat or some minor recoveries. So that's built into the projection. In aggregate, these are a bit small dollar amount there in general fund, but that's just our assumption. And state aid, we mostly based on government's proposal. The county received very, very limited state aid at all from the state in its own budget. There are some state direct appropriation to our education entities, but that goes to those entities directly. The county's own budget, we have very limited exposure to that there. And so far, it seems to be flat or very minor change. We do understand there will be risk for out years there because highway user revenue based on state legislation, not FY27, but 28, there will be significant drop. But also we don't know what's going to happen in General Assembly. If they only go with federal governor's proposal, then the shift is multi-million, but less than last year. But you never know because the state does still struggle with its own structural imbalance. So we'll keep a close eye. The other thing we don't know is in some years, the state general assembly will come out with legislation with like unfunded mandate to add for that. Like we heard from like elections, it might be some request about the new voting system, et cetera, that could have impact new cost on that. Again, those things we're still keep an eye on to see to what extent that could impact the county one way or another. So the overall revenue picture, if you look at the budget to budget, is actually turns out to be a fairly strong year, and it looks a little bit strange, but it's actually, there's a reason. Property tax, as we just mentioned, that remains fairly strong. there is more than 4%. That's very solid, and that account for more than half, pretty much about half of the total. And income tax there, part there, the growth is mostly reflect the higher base, because we talk about last year 25, but also year to date remain strong on that there. So we have been doing my best to doing our best try to reflect that. So the current base has been adjusted higher, and that some part is those more temporary factor, capital gains, etc. there. But we do learn from the state that the overall growth there throughout the last calendar year, some part is solid because withholding also was relatively strong, and they generally believe there are some of the lagging impact of the wage growth, because if you remember a couple years ago, the inflation was very high. Not all employer reflected directly or quick enough for their wages here, so there are some lingering lagged impact of that component as well. So there's reason to believe at least part of that is going to stay in the base, so reflected here on that. Then on top of that, we also built in the baseline growth more in line with Dr. Clinch have that between 3.8% and then longer term close to 4% there. Then we also continue to assume there will be some impact in federal actions there. So we kind of keep the assumption, say a negative 2.5%-ish from the federal government between later this year and next year will get materialized there. Again, we wouldn't know how accurate it will be until years later on that there, but that's where there's a rationale between those numbers there, behind those numbers there. The other factors here, there in general, have much less contributing to the overall growth here, either roughly flat or moderate growth. There is not a significant change on that. But if you compare the budget to budget, that result in a roughly strong growth here. It doesn't mean that's going to continue after FY27, which we're going to talk in a minute on there. So how does that compare to the expenditure needs expressed by different county agencies as well as other education entities there? It still leaves a 67 million gap, even we have really, really strong assumptions for revenue projections for 27. On the education, on school-related new costs alone is about 84 million increase. There are a few different components there. One is that the superintendent's proposal was released. I know the board is still in the process of reviewing it, so we don't have the board's final proposal yet. But based on superintendent's proposal, the recurring funding growth from the county side is about 63.6 million increase. Then if you recall last year, for the first time and only time in the county history, there's emergency bill passed to temporarily relieve the charter requirement that allowed using one-time money to give the school system support ongoing expenditures. So that's 14.5 million. Now that's one-time money is gone, but the service supported continues there. So we have to replenish that 14.5 million with a new revenue. So that's another 14.5 million. And as we just mentioned, that based on governor's proposal and MSDE proposal, there will be close to 6 million new cost-related education that county government has to pick up in its own budget. So everything combined is about 84 million increase. Then when it combined with community college, library, debt service for all those existing and new bonds there, and then all other agencies are including our funding to nonprofits, that leaves a fairly significant gap again on that there. At the same time, obviously, we continue to have to address all those challenges related to those impacted by federal actions, no matter it's business or residents. The county's general fund expenditure structure, this doesn't really change too much from year to year. This just to show the major sectors or categories of services supported by general fund. The blue bar is the education, and then followed by the orange bar, which is the public safety, and then that's more shaded color is public facility. You can see that education remains a top priority. It continues to constitute about 2/3. I think last year, FY26, I just took a quick look yesterday, it's about a 64% of the general fund budget and more than 5 times of the public safety funding on that. And this including, by the way, for the education, that's including both direct funding and those other costs that county government pick for them. That's including like retirement health and debt and other pension costs, etc. on that there. So in recent years, county government does continue and actually make even more efforts, try to provide enhanced funding or investment to our school system there, understanding the needs there. So the bar on the top was showing annual growth of county recurring funding to the school system. Most recent year is FY26. That's an increase of $60 million. You can see the bar have been increasing every year and escalated in recent years, while even the enrollment continued to be sluggish, which is reflected the second graph here, that starting from COVID has been dropping, and at this point we're still lower than pre-pandemic level. And when it's reflected per pupil local funding, if you do the math on that, FY26, we're spending $15,000 per pupil, which is 8.5% growth from prior year. And if you look at the bar, you can see that it has been growing, but in most recent 3 years, it's actually has been more steeper growth in terms of county investment. So in recent years, I also want to acknowledge that the school system in the county has been more engaged and have take a more collaborate approach on that. It's difficult to understand the complexity of the issue and the consequence, a lot of the policy decision, but in recent years, there's I think more collaborative approach, more dialogue on conversation to help everybody understand all those different aspects of the issue. It is positive in that way, although obviously as you look at the request versus the funding, there continue to be the stress coming from the data itself there in terms of the
do you have per pupil if we funded the request fully this year for FY27?
27.
If you
Oh, you say if fully fund that?
if we met
funding?
if the county met the request of what the school system wants this year, what would per pupil funding
I don't
be?
have the calculation. I can do that and later share with the committee. It's going to be another jump there.
Right.
But the other thing
And
is yeah.
Go ahead,
is most of this per pupil funding like this more than 30% increase in 6 years? Is that magnified because enrollment is going down?
Yeah, I
Or
think
is it
what's
mostly
happening.
because of new growth in the
Yeah, I think it's because the funding here, this is absolute dollar funding growth has been escalating at the same time the enrollment has grown. So the per pupil has been growing even faster than what's the bar on the top was showing in terms of the shape. That's what's happening.
right. Yeah, okay.
And this just includes direct appropriation. If you think about that, we just mentioned that we actually have been picking up more in recently of the other costs on that. Like in FY26, for example, the county's budget beyond on top of the direct appropriation school pick up 68.6 million in county's own budget. That includes debt financing, principal interest payment for school infrastructure projects, school retiree health benefits, and obviously some of the new shift from the state. And then in 27 looks on top of there will be additional shift from the state for the pension state for the school employee pension costs, and also there are some local match for the private pre-K that's also going to be added if everything goes as what state proposed currently. So that's also other things the county are shouldering, which is usually not reflecting in all those numbers that people are talking about currently.
Can I bring Jackie into this for a minute, to the extent you have the knowledge off the top of your head? So the spending per pupil that Josh is referencing is one that has our attention, but I guess the question is, how much of that has to do with the changing needs of the school population, and whether the increased percentage of students with special needs or second language issues, um, is as significant as dealing with an aging infrastructure.
You hit the nail on the head. You answered your own question. It exactly the needs of the students, and it's not just special ed and multilingual learners, but it's also the mental health needs following COVID, the impact on students. And so it's, yeah, you already answered your question.
Yeah, what I'm trying to get at is are we seeing are we seeing in the reduced percentage of students that we're actually enrolling in HCPSS, are we losing our highest performers as we're increasing the number of students with those special needs that you're talking about, whether it's second language or special education
Right, right.
or so that I guess are we losing the top end and the children with greater needs are increasing as a percentage, or are they also increasing in number?
I can't actually answer that because they have not disaggregated the data about the students who have chosen to leave the school system, who have been withdrawn from the school system. Um, there's not necessarily, I don't know that they've ever disaggregated it. So you
Uh-huh.
can't say that the higher income people are pulling their children out. It could be people who are moderately income who choose to homeschool their children or, something like that. But we haven't seen those numbers.
This is
Would that be
is each new student more expensive? Like, are we seeing that like the typical new student enrolling now just has more needs?
Like I said, I
Or-
have that kind of data has not been disaggregated. We just get enrollment, but it's not broken down by, what group they're in as far as income and that sort of thing. Not to that degree, or I haven't looked at the numbers in that regard. Um, the enrollment is just one chunk of a number. And I'll have to ask Brian Hall or the folks, back at central office to provide that kind of information. But as a board member, that hasn't been pointed out. It's just been the, enrollment numbers have gone down and the needs have gone up. That's basically what we hear.
This is Barb. Maybe Jackie knows this or Holly. Do we know what percent of the climbing bars and the requests for funding are the new programs required under the blueprint for Maryland's future? Because I would think it would be due to that quite a bit on a percentage basis, but I don't know. Preschool and all that stuff.
Preschool for sure.
Yeah.
Also, the dual enrollment costs. So it's blueprint for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
That's the one that's driving where the dollars are going. Not to say that if blueprint did not exist, we would not be working hard to pay our teachers what they should be paid for their level of education.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
the
Yeah.
blueprint just focused on entry level teachers, but in order to keep people in the teaching field, we have to be competitive, and we're not as competitive as we need to be to keep people in the field because
Right.
it's so challenging.
Oh, yeah. No, we need to pay our educators. I just want an anecdotal story. During Ag Literacy Week, we read to generally kindergarten and first graders, the Ag Book of the Year. But at Bushy Park Elementary School, there are 6 3-year-old classes ranging from very high need children with one-on-one support staff with them, all the way up to those that are 4 years old and ready to go to kindergarten. So by the time you get done reading to 6 classes, it's a lot, but I'm just saying that whole program was never there before. So this has to be a large part of the increased cost. So
Absolutely.
thank you, Jackie.
Yeah, thank you. And all these are good questions. And I do think, I forgot either superintendent or the school staff had some information about blueprint related growth there. So I'll reach out and try to get that there. I do remember the school system and the county have been ahead of curve on the wage related requirement on that there, but pre-K and other part on that, that's the part I don't remember the data. And I'll reach out and get there. Thank you. All right, so moving forward, the multi-year projections here. So we kind of alluded to early that is because of everything we talked earlier, property tax, income tax for 27 appears to be a relatively good year. And after that will remain relatively strong for a couple of years until it's kind of go back to historical level, because property tax takes time for the assessment slow down to reflect it in tax bills on that there. But eventually, if we lack the new growth momentum on that there, that will be more trend down to an average of 3.5% for property tax in future years on that. And income tax for now, we're still tentatively assume close to 4% growth in future years, align with what Dr. Clinch made the preliminary projection for out years there. And other taxes, tax and permits in general are showing a moderate growth on that there. So one thing we talked earlier is about there are continued uncertainties there, but also in the long run there, we are worried that the strength we have been seeing in recent years in terms of revenue is not sustainable. Again, we are still relatively strong, but we are still already started the process and continued in the process, kind of slowing down, more transition towards more sustainable level, which means that the revenue will not be enough, even more not enough to support expenditure needs there. Because next slide is showing the projected needs we collected from different entities. That was actually in aggregate was showing about 6.9%, almost 7% growth each year on average, versus revenue long-term trend beyond 27, we're looking at 3.6%. So that's almost doubling the expenditure growth expected is almost doubling the revenue growth. So that's a long-term concern. Obviously, the school is a big part of that based on the school's current projections needs of the new county funding each year that almost take close to 100% of the project county revenues in the future years on average on that there. So that's going to be continued challenges here that we all have to work together and to find a way to balance on that there. So when it's reflected graphically, it means the annual gap is between 67 to 400 million a year in the next few years if we don't take any actions to address that. So the general strategies in near future, obviously we have to work with everyone to stay within means and try to balance different needs there, but also have to make sure when we do that, don't sacrifice the county's long-term financial well-being. And that's a very important point to make on that there. And then at the same time, we want to support key services, but also provide continued assistance to residents and nonprofits. I have a couple bullets on what the county have been working with EDA and all the nonprofits to provide so far, and some of those would continue in next year. In the long run, the group has rightfully already hit on in prior presentations here that Econ Task Force Chair already mentioned about, and also EDA has been mentioning that we are working closely to try to figure out ways to make some smart investment, primarily use one-time funding to boost long-term economic growth, because that's probably the only viable way that can help promote the long-term growth of the county, plus also emphasize innovative approaches. One of the early questions asking about AI. There are a lot of changes in this world that we are trying to digest and see which part that could be pose new opportunities and can help us position ourselves in the long run in the long run. And last bullet is what the committee has been proposing for the last few years now about at some point the county or county leaders probably should work together involving all key stakeholders to develop a long-term balanced fiscal plan that will have some candid discussion about the trade-offs for different strategies. Most of strategy does have consequence there, and to come out with some kind of largely consensus plan to close enlarging structure gap. That is going to take time. It's a very big undertake, but that's just one thing probably worth considering going forward. So I'm going to wrap up my presentation, and thank you for all the questions so far. Any other questions that we can entertain before we finish? And by the way, I will show the charge for folks there. This one, that if there's no questions here. Okay. All right, so I will go ahead and talk about the charge. This is what Todd mentioned earlier, that for Friday's discussion about recommendations there, we have talked during the kickoff meeting, tentatively assign folks there to more their own expertise area or people or things that they have more interest in about the focus. So ideally, if you can look at this list and see where you are kind of more primarily responsible for, and kind of like take a look at what you have reviewed so far on those different presentations there, see and think about what are some key recommendations you want to propose for these sectors there. For example, for economic development, Bob, Sean, Christy, and if you guys have any thoughts on that there, and obviously everybody can chime in across those different areas. You are not limited to which area, but if you are assigned there, maybe you can more take the lead in a discussion or offer some thoughts or recommendations. So that would be very good if everybody do that. And after the meeting, I'll try to send that, maybe cut and paste this page and resend it just to make sure refreshing the memory of folks and also for those who are not able to make it today. So Todd and others, do you want to add anything?
No, you kind of stole my thunder, but what I'd like to make sure we do is have a couple, 3, 4 bullet points in each of these categories that that are kind of in our takeaway from in the report this year. So if you can come up with a couple in your categories, and if you have thoughts in others that you want to participate in, as Holly said, please do. But if you can distribute those before Friday, that would be great. If we bring them on Friday, that's great. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, Holly, I'm glad you mentioned the Econ Task Force report, which just came out a couple Mondays ago. But I mean, since a bunch of smart people worked on that, a lot of sweat equity, we should look at that to pull out, the nugget, the top or something priority. I just wanted to, you already said that, but I wanted to say it again because all these subjects might benefit from looking at that.
Yeah,
I'm hopeful.
Yeah, definitely. All right, and also just one more, once again, the reminder, this Friday, it's going to be in-person meeting. Obviously, if someone cannot make it, you can still participate online, but whoever can make it, we try to make it in-person meeting, which always kind of help facilitate those interaction when we try to get it together to craft the recommendations there. So that's just the same place as our kickoff meeting there. All right, if no more thoughts there, I think we're right on time there. Thanks everybody for participation, and hopefully see all of you on this coming Friday. Thank you.
Hey, Holly.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, let's wait a couple of minutes and then you and I can reconnect for a few.
Oh,
okay?
let me call you.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
maybe 5-10 minutes and then we'll do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.